Good morning. My name is Karen Talamella-Cusick, Executive Vice President at ImpactWayv, and welcome to the latest in our ImpactWayv Podcast Series. I'm thrilled to welcome today's guest, Charles Boehm. Charles is a writer, editor, communications professional, analyzing and reporting on all levels of soccer in the U.S. and around the world. Welcome, Charles. It's great to have you here today.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be with you.
Before we get started on talking about this particular World Cup, can you perhaps quickly just explain what the World Cup is and why it's such a special event celebrated around the world?
Yes. I should probably start by noting, in the modern era, it's become a little more common to call this the Men's World Cup because we now can and should distinguish this tournament that's happening starting in a few short days in Qatar is the largest soccer event in the world, quadrennial tournament to decide the world champion of international soccer or football. The women's version happens in a year's time, or actually it's always a year after the men's, but in this case it's a little less than a year's time because that's happening next summer in Australia and New Zealand. So this is the biggest event in the world's biggest and most popular sport, and it inspires incredible levels of passion. And we now have going on 100 years of tradition around the event. So very beloved occasion that much of the world, increasingly including the United States, slows down and pays attention to in pretty much every country on earth.
That's great. You're right. You could feel it in the streets now, and that wasn't always the case in the U.S. And thank you for that distinction. There's been a lot of mixed emotions surrounding this particular upcoming World Cup. What are some of the why are some of the people against the competition being held in Qatar?
Well, yeah, it's probably easy to simply look at the calendar and note that we're already in unprecedented territory with the 2022 edition of the FIFA World Cup because it's happening outside of the Northern Hemisphere summer for the first time ever. And that is the first clue as to how different things are and what a complex and contentious backstory accompanies this tournament. So this event is happening in Qatar, a small Gulf state about the size in land area of Connecticut. And now 12 years ago, FIFA awarded this tournament to Qatar under, putting it mildly, to call them contentious circumstances. This was an event that was widely expected to be awarded to either the United States or a combined North American bid or Australia. Those were the two big contenders vying for hosting rights. But FIFA zigged where everyone thought they would zag and awarded it to the smallest country that's ever hosted the event, the first Arab country that's ever hosted the event, the first Middle Eastern nation that's ever hosted the event. And their explanation was that they wanted to do something unprecedented and create sort of a new legacy for the region and beyond. But as it turns out, multiple media reports in multiple different countries, as well as the United States Justice Department's extensive investigations have revealed that we are as sure as we can be, short of a smoking gun, that this event was awarded under corrupt circumstances in which voters in FIFA's Congress were awarded were given millions of dollars and various other sort of soft influence campaigns. Qatar is a petroleum-rich nation that, from as well as we can tell, spread out is spending. We know that above board they're spending somewhere north of $220 billion on the overall event itself, with physical infrastructure and construction. And it seems that they've spent many millions beyond that to buy the votes and gain the influence. And again, I don't want to sound like I'm slandering anyone, but we have a lot of evidence points to that, and we have people who were in those rooms that have spoken out about what they witnessed, but none of it changed. FIFA remained determined to do this. Multiple incidents of corruption were not didn't lead to any change in the decision, and then subsequently, after they won the hosting rights, they initially had said that they would create air conditioning technology to now allow this event to happen in midsummer, despite temperatures that can run up to 120 degrees Fahrenheit. that also proved to not necessarily be everything that it was cracked up to be. And so a few years after the tournament was awarded, the event was shifted to November and December for cooler temperatures, which is to cause a whole other set of cascading consequences relating to media rights, schedule adjustments to dozens of leagues around the world to sort of shoehorn this event into what is normally the heart of the club season in soccer. So it's very controversial, to say the least.
Yeah, it seems so on so many levels. Perhaps looking on the other side, with that being said, there are positives that hopefully can come out of the World Cup for the game, for Qatar, and the Middle East as a whole. What do you think might be some of the benefits that this World Cup could potentially deliver?
Yes, and again, there's a lively conversation, I guess, or discourse happening in various areas, from social media to news coverage, to fan discussions and beyond, and it effectively sort of boils down to this idea that if soccer is to be shared beyond its traditional power centers, beyond its economic power center, which is the core of Europe, beyond its traditional sort of areas of strength and geographic regions that get to host these types of events, which is dominated by Europe and South America, then you will inevitably go into new places that have different standards, different ways of thinking and doing things, and that accepting that there will be disagreement and there will be controversy around that. Qatar has a master plan that the World Cup is sort of sits at the heart of, which is that they feel that they have a ticking clock on their petroleum wealth, and that the World Cup and other events like it is a key opportunity for them to create an economy that is more diverse, to create a standing and a place in the world and a perception in the wider world that will allow them to still prosper after their mineral and petroleum wealth is tapped out. And so they want this to put them on the map in so many different ways. And it is certainly a great example of a region that is just as passionate about the world's game as anyone else, but has not necessarily always gotten to share in it to the extent as those power centers I referenced. And to get more into the specifics, the other controversies of Qatar, we're talking about a country that relies heavily on foreign workers. Something like 80% of the population is from other countries, has been brought in to physically build all the infrastructure and bring Qatar forward. And they're an even larger percentage of the workforce. And these are typically men from the Asian subcontinent, from Southeast Asia, from sub-Saharan Africa, as well as there's also domestic workers from places like the Philippines. And this is not the only Gulf state where this is the case, but in Qatar it's become heavily scrutinized because in the years following the awarding of this tournament, people spent more attention or paid more attention to the various elements of this economic system, starting with the kafala system, which is this idea of sort of economic patronage, where these workers are brought in and they are effectively sort of their employers, their patron, who controls whether or not they can move freely about the country and in and out of the country. They traditionally would hold their passport, and so limit the mobility of these workers. And these workers in one of the richest places per capita on earth were making well below what we in the United States and North America would consider an acceptable living wage or minimum wage. And so over the years, since the tournament was awarded, a number of international labor organizations and advocacy organizations have pressured Qatar to change their policies, change their systems, take better care of these workers, many of whom were living in really squalid conditions while they worked 12-hour days, 6 to 7 days a week in difficult jobs. And the construction jobs were particularly punishing in the desert heat and high rates of death. Now, the specific details of those rates of death are another element that has sort of been cussed and discussed, because it's very difficult to pin down how many of these foreign workers have been made sick or killed by World Cup infrastructure projects or World Cup adjacent projects. And So Qatar has opened up its system and changed a lot of the laws on paper and has received praise from many of these international bodies. The question, though, is in the enforcement, the day-to-day reality of these workers. And many journalists from around the world have reported on this and will continue to report on it as the tournament opens up. But there are others who feel that Qatar's record is not particularly any more damning than even the United States, who will co-host the 2026 edition of the World Cup. You know, how just what a glass house do we live in, for example? What right do we have to criticize this nation who's going about its economic development in its own way, in the way that its traditions guide them to see fit? So multi-layered discussion, to say the least.
Yeah, that goes beyond the discussion of just the World Cup, but you're right, and one that would continue far beyond it. We have this massive event that has these controversial elements, but will deliver positive aspects as well. And how do you reconcile that there's a really strong gray area to this particular World Cup? And the fact that despite all the controversy, we're still talking about it. The games are going to be played. It's going to be covered by the media. Fans all over the world will come out and to support their teams and watch every game.
Yes, I mean, from what we know, many of the official broadcasters, in the case of the United States, Fox has the broadcasting rights, and their approach to this and many other comparable issues is we are going to focus on the soccer and not sort of delve into this murky gray area, because gray areas tend to make people uncomfortable, right? And I think you'll see other entities will do that as well. NBC Telemundo owns the Spanish language rights in the United States, and so it's possible that they will acknowledge some of these topics, but they may not. They may simply focus on what's happening on the field, and that in and of itself is a choice. Has Qatar made the progress necessary? Have they improved their system well ahead of the norm in their region, for example? So there's part of the reason I'm so fascinated to go, and I'm catching a flight to Doha on Thursday evening. I'm intrigued to see what this all looks like and how this all plays out. And again, there's never been a tournament in such a compact area. There will be 4 games a day on most days of the group stage, which is the first half of the tournament. And it's possible you could get to 2 or maybe even 3 of those games in one day if you wanted to. We're talking about a very compact area in and around Doha, where there'll be 8 World Cup venues. So it could be also a massive, mess in terms of the density of people that are descending on this country. I mean, they're still scrambling. They're still constructing housing for all the fans that are going to be coming to visit. There will be, 200 US a night containers made into apartments, right? Out in a sort of a field in the desert to give everybody enough room to lay their heads. So there's so many different elements to this, and I think it will. The way you approach it, I think, is maybe a little bit of a Rorschach test on how you look at the world as an individual and how you look at the sport, and the interweaving of politics and society and economy and sports is always a fascinating place to be, and I think none more so than with the FIFA World Cup.
Wow, that sounds fascinating. You are definitely going to a historic event. That is really cool. On the soccer side, when did the game start, and who are the favorites?
So I'll try not to. Knowing that there's different listeners in different time zones, in the U.S. the games will be. So the opening day is Sunday, I believe, and there's just one game, and that's the one involving the host country, Qatar. Who another huge benefit of getting to host the World Cup is simply the right that you automatically qualify. So this will be Qatar's first participation in the World Cup. By virtue of being the host nation. So that in of itself, some would say, is a huge bonus to getting to host this event. So they will be front and center on opening day, the 20th of November. And then the United States will have its first match the next day on the 21st against Wales. So that will be a big event here on these shores. And then in general, you'll have games that will be, the 4 games will be spread out through the afternoon and evening, with the final kickoff actually happening at 10 p.m. local time in Qatar, which is somewhere, I believe it's around 2 p.m. Eastern time. So again, starting from November 21st, the second day of the tournament, you'll have 4 group stage matches per day. And each team will play 3 matches. And then the top half, in terms of standings in the group stage, the top 2 finishers in each group will advance to the 16-team knockout phase, which starts, I believe, December 3rd is the first day of the round of 16. And so that's when the sort of final chase for the trophy begins in earnest. And then everything sort of builds up to a mid-December climax, where I think we'll here in North America we'll be getting into our Christmas season, just as we reach the peak of the World Cup.
Yeah, that sounds fascinating. And you mentioned the U.S. Is playing Wales. It's also, I believe, playing England and Iran.
England on Black Friday, actually, which I think will be probably the most anticipated game again in North America. I should also point out that Mexico and Canada for the first time in several decades have qualified for this event. So they also have their own 3 group stage matches. All 3 are seen as contenders, though not locks, to advance to the knockout stage. And then once you get into the knockout stages, it's very much a lot of luck and chance in terms of the luck of the draw and the bracket, and then whether you can keep stacking together results and finding ways not to lose, so that the drama really picks up. And so then you see the United States will close out the group stage schedule with another, I suppose, charged event, which is playing the Islamic Republic of Iran, who are currently racked by the women's driven protests there, which have cast a big shadow over their tournament, as well as all the geopolitical implications whenever U.S. and Iran play. Who actually, this is a matchup that also happened in the 1998 World Cup in France. So there'll be a lot of both history and, I think, political intrigue around that match.
Yeah, there's so much more than just the game being played on the field. It's amazing.
Inevitably.
Well, before I let you go with, much congratulations, what do you think will be the lasting legacy of this 2022 World Cup?
It's a great question, and I think that is still being written as we speak. We shall see. When we look back, FIFA's World Cup 2018 was in Russia, and it looks a little different today in the light of everything that's happened with the Ukraine invasion and all the other aspects of the Russian geopolitical landscape than it did at the time. And we'll see whether this event redeems Qatar or proves to be another one of those sort of uncomfortable situations for in an autocratic country.
Oh. Well, I wish you well traveling there. It ought to be so exciting. And thank you for taking the time to be with us before you pack up and get off to the World Cup. So Charles Boehm, thank you so much for joining me today. Thanks for everyone for tuning in. If you enjoyed our conversation, please give us a like and subscribe to our channel.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. See you next time.